Hello everyone, my name is Jackson Daly and I'm a history major and also an intern with the East Texas War and Memory Project. On behalf of my fellow interns, thank you for joining us this afternoon for the first presentation of the War and Memory Lecture Series. Today we celebrate the 66th anniversary of the U.S. Air Force, and we are proud to host U.S. Air Force Major General Chris Adams, a distinguished alumnus, as our first speaker. General Adams graduated from then East Texas State Teachers College as a member of the Air Force ROTC program and later served as Chief of Staff for the Strategic Air Command and as Associate Director of Los Alamos National Laboratory. He received many commendations during his service, including the Distinguished Air Medal, the Department of Defense Meritorious Service Medal, 2 Legions of Merit, and 2 Air Medals for his service in combat. He is the author of numerous books and novels on the Cold War and international diplomacy. General Adams is joined on stage by our moderator, Haley Hassick, a senior history major and coordinator of the East Texas War and Memory Project. Following General Adams' remarks, we will have a question and answer session. Please use the index cards you have received walking in to write questions you wish to ask the General and then pass them to the end of the aisle where the baskets are located. We'll do our best to get all the questions answered. Again, thank you for coming, and now we'll turn it over to Haley and General Adams.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Good. Thank you guys for coming today. My first thing I want you to kind of talk about is the fact that you're in your fancy uniform, and most of the veterans I talk to don't wear theirs. So why did you wear your uniform today?
It's because they can't get theirs on. Actually, Dr. Gruber and I spoke on Monday, and so I really wore the uniform for 3 reasons. First of all, Dr. Gruber said it'd be a good idea. One of the interns had asked him, could he wear a uniform? And I guess wanted to sort of color up the place because I'm not very colorful anyway. So I wore it for 3 reasons. Number 1, I was invited to, but number 2, I wear the uniform when I'm invited to really honor our many veterans, all of our servicemen and women that have served this country so well for so many years, and it's always a privilege, an honor, and a pleasure to once again take it out of its very hallowed enclosure and put it on. But number 3, I wore it because it still fits. That's really key to the number 1 and 2, I guess.
I want to know, and I know this, but they don't. How did you become interested in the military and the ROTC programs?
Well, I left Tomball, Texas, a little town, used to be down in South Texas. Graduated a class of 17 kids down there, and I had a good friend of mine went to Charlton, played football, Sam Maglito, and I thought I could follow Sam up there, and I thought I might even play a little football, but I got there and found out those West Texas boys a lot bigger than me, but I stayed anyway and started playing a lot of tennis instead. But at that time, Charlton was a compulsory military school. It was 24/7 uniform and military training and all of that, and I sort of got hooked on it. Well, concurrent with that, as I completed the 2 years at Charlton, it was a 2-year school then, the Korean War had broken out, and so I started looking for a place to be not drafted, to see if I could get a commission. I wanted to fly. I'd always wanted to fly. I wanted to also get rid of that M1 rifle that we had to carry over at Charlton all the time. So I looked around, and all the flying slots at Texas A&M were taken, although that was just 60 miles from home. I really wanted to go to A&M, but couldn't get a flying slot or an Air Force slot. I looked around, and sure enough, just a year before, the Air Force had come into East Texas State Teachers College, created a detachment here, and I applied for it and was readily accepted. So I came over with a few classmates from Charlton. So I told Dr. Jones eventually brought the whole football team over here the following year and ended up with a 30-year winning streak in East Texas State Teachers College. So that was a byproduct. So I got involved in the program here, and the Charleston guys that came over here had all had had 2 years of compulsory military training, and we did very well when we got here. We had a lot of fun with it as the program built up, and then I graduated. A neat story about that. I'll tell you. Do I have time to tell a story?
Yeah, you have time to tell stories.
Dr. Jimmy G, Dr. James G. was president of Charles at the time. I was telling Dr. Jones, tough, hard-nosed, retired Army colonel, now president of East Texas State. And on the other side of the spectrum was Colonel Gordon Paulson, was our professor of air science and tactics, full colonel. And on the day I graduated, on May the 25th, 1952, which predates everybody in this room, including this building, I guess, that Sunday afternoon over in the auditorium here, we were all downstairs, some 300 of us graduating, 70 of which of the guys in there were receiving commissions in the Air Force. And we're milling around, and Dr. G comes down. He's walking around with us, shaking hands and what have you. And then he got everybody's attention. Just a minute. He said, today we're going to honor some 70 or so, I understand, are receiving commissions in the United States Air Force. Would you all hold up your hands? And we did. Said, who's going to walk across the stage first? And they said, well, it must be Adams over there. So starting with the day, that's after all the academicians and the high graders went across. So he came over to me and he said, Chris, when you walk across the stage, he said, I'm going to hand you your diploma. You take it with your left hand and you salute me with your right hand. I said, yes, sir. That sounds okay to me. Well, a few minutes later, we're milling around and Colonel Paulson comes into the room and he said, I'd like to gather all those who are being commissioned today, come over and we talk about the program and told us after we're finished, we get our degrees, we go upstairs to another room, we accept our oath of office. He said, and by the way, I understand that the president said he wanted you to salute and go across the stage. He said, you're not in uniform, he's not in uniform, so no saluting. I was frozen. I had no idea what to do. So we go through the process. My name gets called. I walk across the stage. I held out to accept my diploma with my, did I go off the air here?
Hello?
Oh, probably me. Okay, better now. To accept my diploma with my right hand, and he jerked it back and handed it to me. I took it. He said, salute, damn it. I did. And walked on stage, and everybody followed suit. You have to know, Dr. Jones and Dr. Jimmy G, what an incredible individual. I'm going to stop talking in a minute.
No, you're okay.
We created the Mitchell Grenadiers while I was here, and I was honored to be the commander of the Mitchell Grenadiers. It was a crack Air Force drill team that we created, and about 30 of us in it. We got to march all over Texas and everybody, but we worked out every Thursday afternoon over here on the campus, and at the end of the day, we'd march across in front of the president's home, and Dr. G was always set up. He was out there standing on the front portico when we walked by, and we had a Jody call, D. Whitley, rest his soul, Commerce Boys, long since passed, created a Jody call. You know, we have a president named Jimmy G. He's our president of old ET. Hey ho, and go by. And Dr. G just loved it. It was great.
I was actually going to ask you about that, so it's okay that you told that story. After you received your commission, you eventually went into the Strategic Air Command. Can you tell us what the primary function of SAC was?
Well, SAC was created at the end of World War II as a Cold War onset in early 1946. And General Curtis LeMay created Strategic Air Command out of the Air Force to build a nuclear weapons that come into being and created a strategic nuclear force. And had a lot of influence in Congress for weapons and both aircraft bomber weapons, missiles, ICBMs, and what have you. And SAC grew to be the largest strategic deterrent force in the world today, and really won the Cold War, and won it without dropping a single bomb or firing a single missile. We won it through deterrence. And I have a book, by the way, I wrote, since you talk about my books, I entitled Deterrence, and it really talks about deterring war by force and by ability and capability to strike if necessary. And President Reagan was a master at that too, as he became our president way in my latter day and when I was there. And we did one of his Star Wars program. I can tell you now, I can't tell you everything, I'd have to kill you, but it was a smoke and mirrors program that just scared the Russians to death and eventually brought the Cold War down to its heels in 1991, and it was all over. But SAC was really a strategic nuclear force capability. I flew bombers for years. I worked in the ICBM program, and you know all the different things that you do as you work way through it. But one of the greatest, most absolute disciplined organizations that I could ever imagine, much less serve in. And my wife will tell you, it was a 24/7 job, just about. We used to joke about being a 90-hour work week, and that's about what we worked. But it was good, and we all served and took great respect and respected our leaders, which is the main thing, I think, Haley, and make it all happen. So.
Well, what were your duties within SAC?
Well, I started out as a second lieutenant pilot, third pilot actually, on a B-36. Some of you don't remember that vast bomber, but 10-engine bomber, and I flew it for 6 years down in El Paso at Biggs Air Force Base. From there, transitioned into B-52s as a pilot. You know, you keep going, working your way up, and from there, I transitioned into ICBMs, a Minuteman missile, as a missile combat crew commander out in South Dakota. And I went to that program because the Air Force had different ways of enticing you, and one of the enticements of going to missiles was the missile education program, whereas if you sign up for missile training, then you can pass the pre-grad course. I forgot what they call that now, but then you could go and work on your master's degree, and it was an elaborate program. Ohio State University was they set up a campus out in Ellsworth or Rapid City, South Dakota, and all of us in the missile program attended graduate school at Ohio State. That was great for all the non-rated by that, non-pilot, non-navigator people, but I found out mid-course Vietnam had cracked up. I got called back to the cockpit, so I had to give up the graduate program, back into flying airplanes, and ended up in Vietnam then. But so that was, sort of the transition, and came back from Vietnam, ended up in, crazy things happen to people. And I love to tell this story. My mother used to tell me the good Lord takes care of fools and little children. Never told me which one I was, but I ended up, for some reason, here I am, I go back, and I keep harking about it. I had a degree in business from East Texas State Teachers College, and I ended up in the Defense Nuclear Agency out of Sandia Base in New Mexico. I had no idea why I was there. I don't think they knew I was there, but coming out of this school, I was a quick learner, and I spent 6 years in the Defense Nuclear Agency, both at Sandia, went to Washington then, became executive to the director of DNA, Defense Nuclear Agency, and life just has all sorts of beautiful paths if you let them do it for you. Don't try to overdo it yourself. Let them do it for you. And so I'm sitting there one day, as I often have, good Lord still looking after the fool, and my boss was a 2-star general. He said, "What are you doing here? You ought to be out in the field, where you can, get some attention and work hard and take command." And so, blip, he made it happen. I ended up going out, being vice commander and commander of a wing, and then air division, motor brigadier, and suddenly ended up at Omaha, Nebraska, staff of SAC, so Strategic Air Command. So, just sort of waved my way through it, working hard, trying to.
Like magic?
Some magic, a lot of magic.
Well, you were in the military during the Cold War, and a lot of different things happened. But the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957. So can you talk to us a little bit about kind of your reaction to that and how that impacted your duties?
Well, I remember that very, very well. At Biggs Air Force Base in El Paso, we were all sort of at work one day, and we hear that the Russians had launched the Sputnik. And it really was a weird feeling. Here we are on the ground in the United States, in Texas, and there's an imaginary feeling, there's a thing flying over us that never happened before, you know. And it really, it put a fright into a lot of people, and it got our attention and what have you. It got the attention of the United States and goaded us in to work hard and to equalize the program. But that was a really important stimulus to wake up call, I guess I could call it, to get your stuff together, wake up and see what's happening on the other side of the world. I don't want to get too far ahead of me, but we've got the same thing happening to us this very day as we speak, with the same people over there doing the same thing, so in a matter of sense. So anyway, Sputnik was a wake-up call for the United States, and it goaded us in to get into the missile program, ICBM program, satellite program, and sometimes you have to be goaded to do things, so that helps a little bit.
Well, and then you mentioned the ICBM program. What did you do, in that program, and how did that change your responsibilities?
Well, I was flying B-52s at the time down in Puerto Rico, Ramey Air Force Base. The Cuban crisis had just passed, and I flew in it, of course, and that sort of brought the Russians back to put them back on their heels again after President Kennedy made that very dramatic move to say you're not going to put missiles in Cuba. Well, as I said, the Air Force had this enticement program. The ICBM program was coming up very rapidly. The Minuteman missile in particular, there were 6 Minuteman bases around the country being established, and so I volunteered for missile duty out of the cockpit, if you will, out of the airplane cockpit. In the missile duty, most of the folks there that came into that duty were non-rated. That were not pilots, not navigators, or non-rated officers in the program. But so I went there, and as I said, got involved in the master's program, the advanced degree program with Ohio State. At the same time, concurrently pulling our alert duty. We're on alert 24 hours at a time in the capsule, 60 feet underground, and each missile crew, there were 2 of us, missile commander and deputy commander. We had control of 10 ICBMs that are scattered within about a 40-mile radius of us. All told, there were 200 ICBMs across the western part of the United States, so Minuteman missiles. We had other missiles too, had Titan II, had a few Atlas missiles, what have you. But the Minuteman was really the preeminent solid propellant missile, and was there 3 years, as I said, in the Ohio State program, and as a missile crew commander when in the early 60s, this was 66, I guess, Vietnam became a real crucial item in the world, and all pilots and navigators got called back to the cockpit, and so I went back with training to fly C-141 transports, which I did. And this is a long, short story too, but I was flying 141s out of Dover, Delaware, into Saigon and to various places in Vietnam, taking in supplies, but one of the most dreadful parts of it was bringing back casualties. And my last flight in 141, I said, I'm not going to do this anymore, and not easy to go tell, your Air Force commander, I'm not going to do this anymore. I carried back 54 caskets in my airplane to Dover, and which was the major mortuary. And I went to personnel and said, I can't do this. If I'm going to go in the war, I want to go there. And my wife just about fainted. We'd only been there like 75 days or so, and I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And they said, okay, Buster, you want to go there? We'll send you there. So they did. And so I got to go. I spent my year over there flying again, and what have you. That might have been a little bit arrogant on my part, but I just didn't have the feeling of flying back with those 54 caskets stacked in the back of my airplane, and a chaplain flying along with us to do homage. So I did that, and it turns out one of the best things that ever happened. Went over there and had an incredible job flying, as well as command as a major. I made lieutenant colonel below the zone, came home, and back to the Defense Nuclear Agency thing. Another one of these things. You go to East Texas State University or Texas A&M Commerce, you can do anything. People pick you because they know where you've been and how good you are. So, is that right?
Yeah, I hope so. You mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your role was during that time? Because it was a very stressful time in the United States. So what kind of missions did you have to fly?
Well, President Kennedy, threw down the gauntlet and said, get the medium-range missiles and the bomber preparations out of Cuba. They had begun to build runways. All of a sudden, we had a wake-up call one day, and in fact, our U-2 reconnaissance aircraft detected a lot of activity going on in Cuba, and amongst those activities were building of runways all of a sudden, and Castro's domain down there, and also building emplacements for medium-range missiles. We're 90 miles from the U.S. coast, of course, and all of a sudden this big fury of activity going on in Cuba, and it was all detected by our U-2 aircraft. In fact, a young guy by the name of Anderson was flying U-2, was shot down by the Russians in Cuba, and that really turned us on then. And so the Cuban crisis really began. We happened to be stationed in Puerto Rico, just coincidentally at the time. I was flying B-52s and bombers. And we'd already been training for several years in 24-hour sorties. Actually, it turned out to be about 25 hours. You take off and fly 25 hours, sortie wherever you're headed. And President Kennedy executed the Cuban crisis program, Chrome Dome we called it, and we put 60 B-52s in the air from all over the United States. And we kept them in the air 24/7 for 4 days, and that made the difference. Every time, I keep going off in the air.
Maybe mine works better.
Well, this is okay now, I think. Anyway, we flew up close written about this a little bit, up close and personal to the Soviet Union. One of the neat things I found about it, I flew 2 sorties in 4 days. And we were just on the coast of starting. Actually, our mission was in flying orbit at about 30,000 feet. We stayed up there, I said, 5 hours with tanker support. But the neat thing was the decisions made by our leaders. I'm really not messing this.
No, not here. We'll switch. Maybe. They don't need to hear me.
How was this? Better? Not better?
No.
Sorry.
It's on.
Yeah, it's on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
No.
Let's do that. Okay, anyway, one of the neat things our commanders did, which I thought was really classic, and it really turned it on. We began all of our position reports. Anytime we flew bombers was in code and classified and what have you. There's 60 airplanes up there flying literally all around the periphery of the Soviet Union, and we were ordered to give our position reports in the clear, open, which meant they could pick it up on a high-frequency radio. And we used to joke, we wonder what's going on down at the Kremlin command post, because there are 60 bombers up there giving a position report, which takes about a minute to give. And, so 1 full hour of position reports, they're here, they're here, they're here, they're here, they're here. And that brought the Cuban crisis to a close in a hurry. About, actually 4 days it was over with. And Khrushchev capitulated, and at great embarrassment to himself, the Chinese really harassed him, as did his own people, the KGB. Every Soviet leader served only at the pleasure of the KGB, the largest intelligence organization in the world, and the KGB really got on him. That's one of the things with the Kennedy assassination occurred just 1 year later, and there was a lot of speculation. I've written about that, by the way. It's called Dallas, Lone Assassin or Pawn, just this year. In which they speculated that maybe this was retribution for President Kennedy and the Cuban crisis. I've written about that. It's a novel, so don't take it too seriously, but it's a fun book. Anyway, you go through all sorts of machinations, let your imagination run wild. But the Cuban crisis was a turning point as far as this country is concerned in terms of our capability and demonstrated capability. Those are long answers, Haley, to short questions.
Mine doesn't work now. That's okay. I'll just talk really loud. Y'all can hear me. October of '66, you went to Thailand. That was your stint overseas. So what did you fly? And like you mentioned, flying transport missions. Is that all you flew? Were there different kinds of missions you flew?
Well, yeah, I did. I went over there, and as I said, I went personnel and was kind of a smart aleck and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I said, okay, so I did. I went to Thailand. I flew C-47s. I had 5 C-47s in my little detachment out of Karat. And I think the youngest bird I had was a 1935 model, so we were flying some really state-of-the-art aircraft all over the country doing lots of different things. If I told you everything I did, I'd have to kill you, as I told you, so I can't tell you that. But we had some interesting missions and support missions. I flew, all over Vietnam, a little bit of Cambodia, a little bit of Laos. I was supposed to be there. We were there doing things. And so I spent a year doing that as the detachment commander and the director of operations actually at a TAC fighter wing. I was in a fighter wing, fighter pilots. In fact, I just had lunch last 2 weeks ago in Dallas with Congressman Sam Johnson. So I'm sure you've heard of Sam Johnson. Sam spent 7 years as a POW, most of it in solitary confinement. He's a fighter pilot. And Sam was stationed just 60 miles from where I was, and every time I see him, I remind him. I tried to protect him, but he wouldn't listen to me, and he literally got shot down while I was there, and he stayed 7 years, and I got to come home. But it was great visiting with him last week over lunch in Dallas. He's still a very credible U.S. congressman and doing a great job representing the North Dallas, Plano area. So I flew for a year over there, and then, as I said, I came back to the States out of the blue. I have no idea where the Air Force was going to send me, and I ended up at Sandia Base, a highly classified base in New Mexico, in the Defense Nuclear Agency, mainly because I had been to nuke school and had dealt with nuclear weapons and aircraft and bombers, and ended up there as an operations officer for 3 years, and from there catapulted to Washington. I was invited to come up to be the exec officer to Vice Admiral Mustin. Lloyd Mustin was my boss, one of the toughest, meanest old Navy admirals I ever worked for, but I learned a lot by tough people, and matriculated on other, even better things.
Well, what was your favorite? I mean, you held a lot of positions in the military, so which one was your favorite position? Was there a favorite?
Actually, I don't know. This is pretty nice sitting right here. Actually, I don't know. They were all good jobs. All good jobs. Some were more arduous than others, more challenging than others. You didn't know what the next step was going to be. I never tried being pretty simple in life. I never tried to plan my career, and I was given that advice years ago to let the Air Force, in this case, plan your. I never intended to do a tour, a full tour, a career, I should say, in the Air Force. In fact, I came back here to this campus in 1957 or 8, and visited with my best friend of all friends on this campus, Harold Murphy. And I said, I think I want to get out, Harold, and come back and get my degree, because I failed to get it before, and my advanced degree. And Harold said, well, what's wrong with what you're doing now? You got a good job, don't you? You're a captain and all that stuff. And I said, I am, but I don't know if I want to do this forever. And he said, well, you make up your own mind. But he said, I think you're on the right track. Well, life moves on in a hurry. And then I'm invited back here. Out in Abilene, Texas. I'm a brigadier general now and commander of an air division. I'm invited to come back to speak here at Old ET, and they have a receiving line. Here comes Murphy down the receiving line. He said, see, I told you. Bless his heart. What a great, absolutely, influence on my life. He and Bill Truax on this campus were just two absolutely friends of friends. When you could just, you cling to your professors in that order. But anyway, did I get off track or not? What was best? I forgot. They were all good. I don't think I had my wife will disagree probably that some weren't as good as others. Some locations weren't good as others. We actually moved one time every Christmas, every December for like 4 years in a row. kept getting fired, but it was fired to the next highest job. And our daughter's sitting right there, who's an assistant dean here, went to 4 different high schools in 4 years, and still graduated as a valedictorian, so she didn't do too bad either. So, you know, tough on kids, tough on other things, tough on you, on your family, but, you know, you forge on, and usually things work out pretty good. That's the advice I give every student in here, you know, you do your best, and the best will come to you, I guess. So many examples of it all around.
Well, what about retirement? How did you come to the decision to leave the military and move on to different things?
Well, okay, move on to different things. I was very happy, one of the happiest jobs I had, although the location in Omaha is not too good. We spent 5.5 winters up there and lived in Omaha. You don't know what winters are, but I was chief of staff, Strategic Air Command. I worked under, I guess, 2 or 3 different commanders and chiefs while I was there. I'd already been notified I was to go out and become commander of 15th Air Force, March Air Force Base. And I don't know, about 25,000 people or so in 15. I was to get my 3rd star and what have you, and I thought, well, okay, well, this is our next move coming that year in 1983. And again, it's this good Lord thing again. I'm sitting there and one day, and the director of Los Alamos National Laboratory is in the headquarters visiting, as those people did off and on. Dr. Kerr, Don Kerr, and Don came in, and I had met him back in my defense nuclear days when I was a young officer and he was a young scientist. And he came in, sat down in the office, and we chit-chatted a little while. I knew he was on a mission, but I didn't know what the mission was. And he said, well, what are you going to do when you retire? And I said, well, I don't have any plans. I've got another at least 5 years retainability under the rules, and I don't need to retire. Besides, I've got another job coming here in about 6 months. And he said, well, okay, just want to see what your plans are. Great to visit with you. He left. Well, about 2 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail, certified letter, and it's got a job offer in there that just about blew me away. We didn't know what to do with it. Offered me a job as associate director of Los Alamos for operations. We had 4 associates out there, physics, math, nuclear physics, and operations, technical operations. Well, certainly not a physicist, you know, with a business degree from East Texas, but anyway, I studied that thing long and hard, and it had a couple of real pluses in it. One was money. The other was potential, and the other was ego, I guess. You can't take ego away from being offered something. So we studied it over a couple of days, and then I accepted the job and had to write a letter to Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And as a general officer, you have to request retirement, see if they grant it. And they grant it because there's always somebody to take your place. I mean, there's a lot of guys back there behind you saying, boy, I can't wait till he goes because I'm going to get his job. And so I retired and went to Los Alamos as Associate Director for Operations. And it was a good move. It was a good move. I had about 25, there was 7,000 people in the lab. I had 2,500 of them working for me, and most all of them were physicists in different categories. I had the medical occupational health there. I had about 25 MDs and others in one of my divisions, and it was a life learning experience. I learned a lot, and in a hurry, and had to keep up with them. But it was a fun job, and I do have to tell this story though, Dr. Jones, with all due respect. I was invited to go over and see Dr. DeTavio about a year ago, I guess, on an issue, and we were trying to create a distinguished alumni chapter over there. And so I told one of the guys, a friend of mine, he's a retired PhD professor, I was going to go over and see Dr. DeTavio and talk about this chapter. And he said, well, Chris, he said, maybe I better go with you. He said, you know, you go see a university president, a PhD, you sort of, you know, there's a communications link there that needs to be, you know, accommodated, bridged, or what have you. And I said, well, John, I've met him, I've been in his company. And he said, well, but maybe I ought to go with you to help you sort of communicate. And I said, okay. So I looked by it and I said, John, let me tell you this. I said, I was at Los Alamos for, quite a time. I had 2,500 PhDs, physicists, MDs, all working for me. And I said, they all have one thing in common. He said, what's that? I said, they call me boss. And so we got on that little level and went on. But you got to live life with jokes, If you don't, then, John said he didn't need to go with me, so we did all right.
Well, you keep talking about how you graduated from East Texas State Teachers College, and you went on and you worked with a whole bunch of people from the academies and from larger four-year universities. And you had a successful career. I would classify it as successful, and I think everybody else would too. But what advice do you have for current students and kind of recent graduates from this university?
Well, I think the most important thing is to be proud of where you came from. Take all the pride with you, and pride is one of the key words at this university, always has been. And live your life, do your job, work hard. And I tell kids all the time, I talked to some Marine cadets last night at Granbury High School. We had a dinner last night. There was 3 Marine cadets, high school cadets at our table. Study hard, make good grades, and graduate. Those are the 3 key things. And then after you graduate, then go and do what you were trained to do, but don't necessarily get stuck in the job you were trained to do. And I learned that very quickly in the Air Force. I jumped from one discipline to the next discipline to the next discipline, and learned hard. One thing I really tried to do, and I told my young guys and ladies as I moved along the way, I try to walk in every moccasin you can before you become chief, because you need to know where you are before you jump to the next. I saw so many young officers in the Air Force that wanted to get ahead, they wanted to leapfrog ahead and hurry up and get there. I had a young lieutenant ask me one time at Press C. Warren Air Force Base when I was wing commander. He came, he said, sir, how do you get to be a general? And I said, the best job you'll ever have in the United States Air Force, the best job you'll ever have is the one you have today. And when you do that job and get it done, then the next job will be the best job you ever have that day until you go ahead and move on to the next. But don't try to leapfrog or go too fast. Do your job, do it well, perform well where you are today. Do that job. And that's the advice I give my kids, the advice I give to every student, is to work hard at what you're doing and don't try to look ahead or look around the corner. And don't be intimidated. Haley mentioned, when I first got out, I went to pilot school out of here, directly out to Georgia, to Moultrie, Georgia, Air Force pilot training school. And golly, I was surrounded out there. I was a single East Texas State Teachers College graduate there. Had Notre Dame there, we had the Citadel there, we had Northwestern there, and University of California there, USC there. Every university ROTC product, as well as a lot of Westporters in this before the Air Force Academy was built, all in there. And you can be easily intimidated by these folks, and they can intimidate you because they're just smart, you see, smart aleck to a large degree. And I got teased a lot for being Texas #1 and being from East Texas State Teachers College #2. But you rise above that after a while, and then later on in life you look back at them and say, well, what happened to you? Sorry I missed you on the way. But so you work hard, do your job, and try not to be as smart aleck as I'm being right now, but I can afford to be now, see. So, but when you're working at it, you don't. You work hard and study hard, make good grades, graduate, and then go out and show life what you can do. You're beating me to death.
Well, I don't have any more questions, so I just wanted to thank you and open the floor to any questions. I can't hand my microphone around because it doesn't work. Because that would have been my luck. Okay. We only have one question.
Oh, good.
Oh, Lord. How did Old ET help contribute to your success? And then I'll ask the second question because they're separate.
Well, it contributed to my success that I've had in every way possible. I enjoyed this campus for the 2 years that I was here, and enjoyed every bit of it. I told little war stories about Dr. G, who was our president at the time, and the other professors I had, the Harold Murphys of the world, Bill Truaxes of the world, and all the others had an influence, as all your professors do today. Each one of them does, your president does in his leadership, as do all your professors and all your interactions, all your students. Everybody has an impact on your life. The school was a lot smaller then. I think we had about 3,000 students, something like that, but it doesn't matter. Big school, small school, you build your niche and work and perform within it to the best of your degree, and study hard and make your parents proud of you. And I think that's the key that I would give anybody, any advice, and then later on you'll be proud of yourself. You're never gonna, I don't think anybody gets to the pinnacle of where they want to be. You become president of the United States, you're still looking for something more. And I don't really believe in that concept. I think take what you can get when you can get it, work hard, and study hard, learn your job, know your job, perform in your job, and then good things will happen.
Okay, and then the other question is, why is war and memory important?
Well, it's extremely important, Haley, because as I cited out there a moment ago to kids, if I could claim an ancestor, it would be President John Adams, who was quoted saying, if you want to know where the country's going, you need to know where you've been. And all too often we live in this moveon.org environment and we just can't move fast enough to get on to the next thing. We don't solve today's problems first. Since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, there have been 42 million young men and women that have claimed the honor of wearing a uniform in our country. Well over 1 million have been killed in the line of duty. Several millions have been wounded or still being wounded today. And that's where I think your War and Memories lecture series is very important, is to remind people that happened. That event happened. Those people were there. And if they were associated with this university, it's great. If they weren't associated, but I use Sam Johnson as a good example. Shot down as a fighter pilot, a young captain, spent 7 years away from his family in solitary confinement. John McCain is another. And I know several of those folks that spent years over there. And they came home and they made great successes of themselves in spite of all that inhumanity that was imposed on them. So I think your lecture series is important. Many of these folks, you can go out and take their life stories. Some about GIs or military people. All services like to talk. I like to tell stories. You already see me up here talking too much, but it's important. About a month ago, I was invited to speak to the Happy Warriors group in Dallas. They meet at Love Field once a month. The Happy Warriors are a group of about 150 of genuine happy warriors. They're by and large World War II, Korea, and a few Vietnam veterans as they grow older. But 150 of them. There are more walkers and canes and crutches in the room than anything else. But they were a group of happy warriors. There was 150 of them in the room, just about like this. And they just, what a delightful group of men, in that case, a few women, mostly well advanced in age, but they want to talk, they want to share, and it's a camaraderie amongst them to meet once a month there at Love Field and just to visit and talk and about their experience. I won't say commiserate, but some commiseration too. But there are a lot of groups like that. I belong to the Military Officers Association of America, which is a joint military group, all services. We have a chapter in Granbury that we kicked off a year ago. We have about 75 members. All total, we're about 300,000 members of the Military Officers Association of America. It's a big lobby group. They have a lot of influence on trying to influence better situations for our service people, our servicemen and women, for our veterans especially. But veterans are an important feature. They come back to life and live out here doing all sorts of different things, some good, some not so good situations. You see reports on TV all the time, particularly these kids coming back from this latest disaster we have over there in the Middle East, which I won't even go into that, I have my own opinion, but veterans need to be honored. They served their country, they served under the most harshest of situations and circumstances that anybody can believe. The POWs being the worst of all, of course, during Vietnam. But it's a great program. I admire you for doing it. I think it's going to build a legacy for this university and for you, you gals and guys that are doing it. The interns are really I think Eric Gruber has done a wonderful job of pulling his program together. I think it has a lot of merit, has a lot of future potential to it. So.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions, that even if it's not on a note card?
Hello,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Adams. My name is Austin Baxley, and I was wondering, do you consider yourself to be a hero?
No. Not in any sense of the word. There are heroes out there. I'm not one of them. Didn't even come close. Not even to my kids. We are who we are. I don't, there are heroes out there. I name a few, but they're hard to come by. It's always a glitch in some of our lives. That's a good question, though. I appreciate that.
Anybody else?
Your parents are probably your heroes. They ought to be. I hope they are.
What do you think the government will do about the Soviet Union's recent actions, and what do you think they should do?
Boy, I know what they should do. I just finished this book. I'm glad you asked that question. I finished the book, just published, and had some good luck with it. It's entitled Dallas, and it really is a novel. It's a narrative. It's a parody regarding the Kennedy assassination. In no way is it a pun. It's a very serious novel based on, I spent 5 years in Russia, by the way, post-Air Force, post-Los Alamos, working for a company, made 23 extended trips over there over a 5-year period. Learned a lot about the Russians at the time. Met a lot of KGB agents. I had one, Sasha, who is my main character in my book. It has been in 5 of my books. Sasha Katsanov was my translator in Moscow. Learned a lot from Sasha. Well-groomed, well-trained. This guy, I could take Sasha, put him downtown Dallas. I put him downtown New York City. I could put him in London, and Sasha becomes there. I was talking to him one night in the hotel room, and I was going to meet with Mr. Bolshakov in the morning, and I said, Sasha, here's what I'm going to do in the morning, Bolshakov, because I'm not getting along very well with him. Negotiating some property rights to put some fiber optic cable down. I laid it all out to him, and he said, Chris, that dog won't hunt. Just like that. Okay, Sasha, he's from Texas today. Well, anyway, I got a little bit off track there, but in the book I just finished, I wrote created a codicil at the end of it, a summary. And I really talk about, in this summary, just to bring us up to date to 2013, Mr. Vladimir Putin stepped out of the KGB, uniformed KGB in 1991, trained KGB agent in the uniform side, lieutenant colonel, and decided to go politics. And the 22 years later, Mr. Vladimir Putin is the wealthiest leader in the world today at assumed or net wealth in U.S. dollars, $43 billion. He owns 5 Dashas. He owns 4 luxury cruise boats, one of them worth $1 million. Vladimir Putin has been elected and re-elected now 3 times, president of the Soviet Union, president of Russia, excuse me. And all sorts of things have taken place. In 2010, June of 2010, there were 12 undocumented Russians arrested in the United States. Most of them in Washington, one over here in Plano, a lady. Undocumented, living under assumed names. And what did we do? We covered it all up. We put on an airplane and sent them home the next day. No questions asked. The very moment in 2011 that President Putin sat down with President Obama sat down with President Putin in Mexico City. At the very moment that event occurred at the G8 conference, 30 Russian bombers flew right up the Aleutian chain from Russia, circled around just south of Fairbanks and flew back home. We cycled up to it. This year, February the 16th, President Obama gave his State of the Union address, and the very moment he gave that address, 2 IL-92 Soviet bombers, nuclear bombers, flew out over Guam. That happens to be a U.S. territory, as you know, and circled over Guam. We went up, took a look at them, and they flew back home. Last December, Mr. Putin canceled the Russian adoption program. Some 300 young Russian orphans pending adoption. Folks have spent a lot of money traveling back and forth to visit those kids, bond with them. Suddenly cut the program off, they can't go anymore. You can't adopt these kids. And, you know, it sort of goes on and on. Last October 2012, Mr. Putin suddenly canceled what we do as the non-nuclear program, chemical and nuclear weapons reduction program, which we put about $500 million to in this country over time. Well, I could deem all through these different things with what's going on in the Soviet Union. I sort of summarized that codicil by saying that we need to recognize that the elephant is still in the room and he's just getting a little fatter every day. And I published my book before this recent Syrian thing came out. And one of the things that really irritates me, and I'm getting very political here and I won't get too much further, no one's asked the question, who manufactured those chemical weapons and the hardware that encapsulates them, and who manufactured those? Syria didn't, Iran can't, Iraq can't. They don't have the capability, the technology to do it. We know where they came from. And it's no wonder Mr. Putin wants to capture that program in a hurry and get it under control. And so right now, we don't look very good. We don't look very good politically is one word. We don't look very good nationally. We don't look very good internationally. We really look awfully weak. And I'm speaking that from inside this uniform, but also inside my heart. And it's a scary world out there right now, and it's a scary path that we're tracking up. So I got a little far off of that, but that's okay.
Sure, yeah.
Good question.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have, so I just wanted to thank you for sitting down with us this afternoon and for your service to the United States.
Yeah, thank you very much.